But as an outsider, with no friends locally, how could I create a solid alibi? Then, he thought of a way. At 10 a.m., Leo Liu arrived at the Jean County Public Security Bureau. Last time, it was Greg Wang who personally visited him in the city. Out of respect and reason, he should cooperate with the police investigation. But this time, the county bureau staff called him, seemingly issuing an order, asking him to come to Jean County this morning. The city and Jean County are 2 hours away by car. Why should he spend time and money to rush to Jean County? Although Leo Liu had been in business for some years and had met some officials, he dared not offend the people from the Public Security Bureau. Jean County might not be able to control him, but if you offend someone within the system, there are countless examples of settling scores after the autumn, cleaning up your case later on. He had heard of bosses who were high-profile for a moment, offended the leadership without understanding the consequences, and were later framed and sentenced, even losing their properties. He considered himself upright in his dealings, but like all businessmen, he had engaged in tax evasion to some extent. Chinese laws, stacked up, are taller than a person. When there's no issue, the law won't bother you. But if an official wants to deal with you, with so many laws, there's always one that fits you. Leo Liu, masking his displeasure, put on a smile and, led by the county bureau staff, arrived at Greg Wang's office. Greg Wang ordered the door to be closed, politely asked him to sit down, and first apologized. "I'm very sorry to ask Mr. Liu to make a trip to our Jean County. I really couldn't get away recently and couldn't visit, so I had to ask Mr. Liu to come." Leo Liu sneered in his heart at this bureaucratic pretense, which was pitifully fake. If there was something to ask, a direct phone call would suffice, yet they insisted on him coming in person to cooperate with their investigation. However, he did not let this emotion show, only responding with a perfunctory smile. "Director Wang is too polite. Just tell me what you need, I will do my best to help." "Is it still about the last incident?" Greg Wang nodded. "Last time, I didn't explain some things to you in detail. Do you know River? The deputy chief of the police station related to the He family, that one?" "Correct, River was killed by Jasmine Gan, and his wife and son were later murdered. You know about this, right?" "I've heard some rumors among classmates." River's son, River Jr., was kidnapped on the night of November 19th. Leo Liu nodded, waiting for him to continue. Greg Wang sat back in his chair, glanced at him as if casually, yet with an imposing manner. "On the night of November 19th, where were you?" "Me?" Leo Liu was startled, not understanding the meaning of his question, why it was directed at him. But it had been a month, and recalling where he was that night was difficult. Whether he was with a client or at home, he couldn't clearly remember. He could only say, "Does my whereabouts have anything to do with the case?" Greg Wang did not answer directly but continued to ask, "What about November 20th, where were you then?" Leo Liu became somewhat nervous. "It's been so long, I can't remember." Greg Wang stared at him and said, "Let me help you answer. On November 20th at 2:15 p.m., you got on the highway, and at 4:10 p.m., you got off the highway and arrived in our Jean County." Leo Liu suddenly felt a chill, breaking out in a cold sweat, realizing the deep meaning behind Greg Wang's questions. He was being suspected as the murderer. "The day after the incident, what were you doing in our county?" I. Leo Liu was very nervous. "Then you went to the He family, right?" Yes, I went to visit the He family." "You told He Jianxing's mother that you were representing your class to visit the He family, but when we asked other classmates, they had no idea about you representing them to visit the He family." I just... Greg Wang continued, "Last time I came to you, asking about Jasmine Gan's past boyfriend, you weren't very clear, only mentioning Wu Gang's name." "But how could you forget, you were Jasmine Gan's boyfriend," he said with a cold laugh. Leo Liu shivered, having never faced such a situation before, stuttering in defense. "I was in a relationship with Jasmine Gan for a few months. We didn't develop a deep relationship. Later, it was she who proposed breaking up, I thought. I thought it wasn't very important, and I didn't want to mention past things, so I didn't say. Is that so? This reason sounds reasonable. What was the reason for your breakup with Jasmine Gone? Personality differences. Greg Wang sneered. That's a universal reason, isn't it? All breakups are due to personality differences. But you seem very devoted to Jasmine Gone. After so many years, she had a child with someone else, she herself is gone, and you alone came to visit the He family. Does your current wife know about your visit to the He family? Liu Lu's face turned red, honestly answering, she doesn't know. Your visit to the He family just happened to be the day after the Jiang family incident. Isn't that a bit coincidental? This November 21st just happened to be the 7th anniversary of Jasmine Gone's death. I came to the He family on the 20th to ask about the grave's location, and the next morning I went to the grave and then returned to the city. Is there anyone or anything that can prove that from the afternoon of the 20th to the morning of the 21st, you only did these two things, visiting the He family and going to the grave? Liu Lu nervously racked his brain. He had no other friends in Jin County, and after asking about the grave's location, he stayed in a hotel. The next morning, he went to the grave, left a bouquet of flowers, and quickly drove back to the city. Who could prove he only did these two things? He didn't know how to answer for a moment. At that moment, Greg Wang received a phone call, and after hanging up, he looked annoyed. Shortly after, Liu Lu's phone rang, and seeing it was his wife, he signaled to Greg Wang to take the call, which Greg Wang did not oppose. After picking up, his wife told him that less than 5 minutes after he left home in the morning, a team of police officers arrived, presented a search warrant, and spent several hours thoroughly searching the house inside and out, leaving it in disarray. At the same time, as soon as the company opened in the morning, another team of police officers came for a search. In the end, the police asked his wife if there were any other addresses for their home, and after she told them they only had this one property, they called the housing bureau to verify before finally leaving. After several hours of turmoil, they just left. She didn't know what had happened, all the police officers were tight-lipped, and she didn't dare to call until they had left, rushing to inquire about the situation. Liu Lu, with his back turned, was furious, biting his teeth in anger. He had kindly cooperated with the police investigation, spending time and money to come to Jin County, only to find it was a trap. They had been tracking him, and as soon as he left home and got in the car, his home and company were searched. His wife and employees had no idea what was happening and thought he had committed a crime and was arrested. He suppressed the sadness in his heart, trying his best to comfort his wife, saying he was able to make a phone call now. It was nothing, reassuring her with many words, and finally hanging up amidst his wife's anxiety. Turning around dejectedly to face Greg Wang, the deputy director of the Public Security Bureau, Liu Lu, no matter how angry he was, dared not express it, only frowning and asking discontentedly, "Director Wang, what is the meaning of all this? Asking me questions, searching my home, do you really think I'm the murderer?" Faced with Liu Lu's dissatisfaction, Greg Wang did not intend to lie. Since he had called Liu Lu to the county bureau, he planned not only to extract information but to interrogate him, only lacking direct evidence, making it difficult to conduct the interrogation in the interrogation room. Liu Lu avoided mentioning that he was Jasmine Gone's ex-boyfriend, and according to the highway toll records, he had been to Jin County the day after the incident. Additionally, he was in the chemical trade, making it easy for him to obtain the tools for the crime. His height matched the analysis of the surveillance footage, and although his weight was lighter than the fat man in the analysis, the fat man in the surveillance was wearing heavy winter clothes, possibly not as fat as they had anticipated. At 36, Liu Lu was starting to gain weight in middle age, at least not skinny. Various signs indicated that Liu Lu was a major suspect in the crime. Therefore, after having someone follow Liu Lu around the clock for 24 hours, Greg Wang notified him to come to the county bureau. Right after Lu left his house and got into his car, the police simultaneously raided both his home and his company, hoping to find remaining materials related to the crime, but they found nothing. However, just this alone was not enough to eliminate the suspicion of Liu Lu committing a crime. In the eyes of the police, items like nicotine and cyanide, which are highly toxic, are generally not kept at home or in the office. The police believed he must have other hiding places. Greg Wang looked at Leo Lu and said calmly, "Mr. Lu, let me be frank with you, the situation you're facing is very serious. You'd better think carefully. Where exactly were you on the evening of November 19th? Leo Lu replied anxiously, "It's been so long, how can I remember right away? I might have been at home, or possibly out with friends, but definitely not in Jean County." "What about the evening of December 6th? December 6th? What happened on December 6th? It's been half a month, let me think, I don't remember if I was at home or out, I need to check. Anyway, I was definitely in the city." "How can I believe what you say?" "I indeed visited the He family in Jean County on the afternoon of November 20th, but you can check my car for November 19th, it never left the city." "That's easy, you could have borrowed a car." Leo Lu became even more anxious. "Director Wang, that's impossible. I have a wife and children, how could I possibly commit murder? I really can't understand why you would suspect me. The fact that you were once Jasmine Gan's boyfriend, you should have told us the truth." Leo Lu argued vehemently, "We were never officially boyfriend and girlfriend. I liked her a lot, I pursued her, and she did spend some time close to me, but our relationship was very shallow, we never even kissed. It lasted only 2 months. She felt that we were not compatible in terms of personality and aspirations, and she took the initiative to break up. Many classmates know about this, you can verify with them. The reason I didn't say it is partly because I don't think this counts as being boyfriend and girlfriend, afraid that mentioning it would cause trouble for you and for me. On the other hand, this matter has always been buried in my heart, so many years have passed, I didn't want to bring it up again. I didn't expect it would be for this reason that you would suspect me. If I really intended to deceive, with other classmates knowing, could I hide it?" Greg Wang chuckled coldly, "Have you been unable to forget her for more than a decade?" Leo Lu blushed slightly. "There are always some memories hidden in one's heart, just occasionally reminiscing. After all, I once pursued her, and she has always had a good image in my heart. So even after her death, you secretly went to Jean County to visit her family, this affection is really strong." Hearing this, Leo Lu hurriedly defended, "No, I'm just a bit nostalgic sometimes. After knowing about her incident, I always wanted to come and see, but I couldn't find the time. When her 7th death anniversary came, I came to visit her grave, just to let go of the memories in my heart." Greg Wang nodded meaningfully. "It sounds like, regarding the information you hid about being Jasmine Gan's former boyfriend, and your reason for coming to our county the day after the incident, both seem reasonable." Leo Lu couldn't control himself anymore and shouted, "That's the truth." Greg Wang waved his hand, making a gesture to calm down, and said, "All right, let's set aside this topic for now. I want to ask you, where can one buy nicotine?" "Nicotine? What do you need nicotine for?" Leo Lu was puzzled. "High-purity nicotine. That's a highly toxic substance, what for?" "I know it's highly toxic, I just want to ask where it can be bought." Leo Lu replied, "Maybe some pesticide factories have it, it's used in insecticides." Greg Wang said, "Pesticide factories don't have nicotine with a purity of over 95%. Leo Lu shook his head, "Then I don't know. Is it said that it can be extracted by oneself? Do you know how?" Leo Lu was stunned. Although he didn't know that the Jiang family mother and son were killed by nicotine, Greg Wang's questioning made him roughly guess that nicotine must be related to the case. Saying he didn't know how to extract it would obviously make Greg Wang more suspicious. The extraction process of nicotine is not complicated, so he had no choice but to say, "I saw it mentioned in organic chemistry when I was studying, but I've long forgotten." "Just flip through a book and you'll know how, right?" Leo Lu angrily said, "Such experiments, if not controlled properly, can release vapors into the air that are harmful to one's health. I have never done such dangerous experiments. And to produce the 95% purity you mentioned, it requires repeated purification. If I were the murderer you're talking about, my home would definitely have the tools and materials for extraction. Didn't you go to my house? Did you find any? Greg Wang did not want to point out that he might have other places. After all, they had no evidence now, and all this was just speculation. He just continued to ask, where can one buy hydrogen cyanide? Hearing this, Liu Lu was puzzled again. First, it was high-purity nicotine, now it's the highly toxic hydrogen cyanide. He didn't know the details of the case, so he could only answer, hydrogen cyanide is used in the extraction of some non-ferrous metals, they would buy it from chemical plants. Has your company ever purchased hydrogen cyanide? Liu Lu denied immediately. Impossible, never. Hydrocyanic acid is a controlled substance, all purchases must be registered and recorded. Our company deals with petrochemical products, we have never dealt with any highly toxic substances. Greg Wang sighed, all right, that's all for today, stay in the county for the next few days. Liu Lu was shocked and could no longer contain his anger. On what grounds? What evidence do you have to suspect me? Greg Wang sneered, are you counting on us not having direct evidence right now? This is illegal. Don't worry, all investigation procedures are complete. We're not planning to detain you, we've arranged a hotel for you. We need your cooperation for the investigation in the next few days. If we can eliminate your suspicion, I will personally apologize to you. I don't agree, I have a company, I have a family, I'm not a criminal, why are you restricting my personal freedom? My company has a lawyer. Greg Wang was unimpressed, you can communicate with your work and family over the phone, we won't restrict your calls. As for staying in Jean County for the next few days, it's a necessity for the investigation, all procedures are complete. If you have any complaints, you can file a complaint against me. Additionally, if it turns out that we can eliminate your suspicion, our county bureau will send someone to your family and company to apologize and explain. Are you satisfied now? After speaking, he made a call to Captain Lin to take Liu Lu out and make arrangements. On the way, Jack Lin told Liu Lu, implying that he should cooperate more, as Director Wang was already being nice. All the procedures had been prepared in advance, and if it were someone else handling the case, the investigative methods might not be so regular. Liu Lu pursed his lips and remained silent. He had heard about how some places handle cases, finding a suspect and directly using various methods on them. Even if the real culprit was caught later, those wrongly accused were merely compensated in a perfunctory manner. Although Greg Wang restricted his freedom for a few days, there were procedures and relevant legal regulations to follow. He knew that even if he complained, it would be useless. If he angered the police, they might deal with him even more harshly later, so he could only consider himself unlucky. The most urgent task was to quickly check the calendar and recall where he was on the evenings of November 19th and December 6th. As long as he could eliminate his suspicion, they would definitely let him go immediately. In the afternoon, Jack Lin came back to report, "Boss, Liu Lu has been arranged properly, someone is watching him 24 hours a day, and his phone is being monitored, all calls will be recorded." Greg Wang let out a tired sigh, sinking deeply into his chair and closing his eyes slightly, but I think Liu Lu is not the murderer. Why? He lied, and he was in the county the day after the crime occurred. Plus, his height and occupation match the profile of the murderer. Greg Wang shook his head, the problem is exactly his presence in Jean County the next day. If he was the perpetrator, why would he blatantly drive his car on the highway to our county right after the incident? By doing so, he might have intended to cover up his presence in the county on the night of the 19th. After committing the crime, he could have returned to the city and then driven on the highway on the 20th afternoon, leading us to mistakenly believe he left the city only on the 20th, thereby misaligning the timeline of the crime. Greg Wang still shook his head, there's no need for that. In both crimes, the murderer killed from a distance, and so far, we haven't been able to retrieve any direct evidence like footprints or fingerprints of the murderer. The murderer himself would be well aware of this. The clues we have don't directly point to any individual. If it was indeed Liu Lu, why would he draw our attention before we could suspect him? Moreover, he visited the He family in the county on the 20th, a place he had never been before. A murderer wouldn't deliberately expose himself to our investigation. Jacqueline said, maybe he's doing the opposite of what would be expected, deliberately acting in a way that doesn't fit the usual criminal behavior. Then let me ask you, why would he hide the fact that he was Jasmine Gan's ex-boyfriend? Jacqueline looked puzzled. Yeah, why? What did he say? He said that since his relationship with Jasmine Gan was short-lived and not deep, he kept it to himself, not wanting to bring trouble to us or himself. If he was the murderer, it doesn't make sense for him to deliberately hide the fact that he was Jasmine Gan's ex-boyfriend, because we would eventually find out through questioning their other classmates. Jacqueline sighed in frustration. If he's not the murderer, then this case becomes even more difficult. I received news at noon that Wu Gang has been working in Canada all this time, and he has cancelled his domestic household registration. The city bureau sent a fax to the local police, confirming he never left the area. Meanwhile, the investigation into the car owners on Anil Road that day has hit a deadlock. Apart from a few people who have solid alibis, most claim they were at home, making it difficult to identify or exclude suspects. Greg Wang rested his head on his hand, pondering for a while before speaking. This case has become quite challenging. The suspect is too cunning, leaving no substantial clues except for a clear motive. The most critical issue is that there are two murderers, and the identities, genders, and relationships of both are unknown, significantly complicating the investigation. Jacqueline also looked troubled, having never encountered such a sophisticated crime in his policing career. The usual method of visiting and gathering information from the community has yielded no leads this time. Even the most relied-upon surveillance cameras, apart from the footage deliberately exposed by the murderer, failed to capture the fat man, indicating the murderer's deep familiarity with the crime's surroundings and evasion of all surveillance. Moreover, the fact that there are two perpetrators, a rarity in non-financially motivated vendetta crimes, adds to the mystery of the case, making it difficult to determine if the fat man and the person who made the kidnapping call are the same individual. After much thought, Jacqueline was at a loss about the next steps, leaving everything to Greg Wang's arrangement. Boss, what can we do next? Greg Wang took a deep breath, straightened up, and said solemnly, so far, the investigation into the vehicles on Anil Road, surveillance checks, and neighborhood inquiries have yielded nothing. These conventional investigative methods have reached a dead end. We'll put these aside for now and reassign our personnel. First, we need to firmly grasp the direction. The motive for this case is very clear. It's all about Jasmine Gan. Secondly, the murderer's method of crime clearly reveals his chemical background. We've thoroughly investigated Jasmine Gan's colleagues, and among them, few had the chemical expertise, and they have been excluded. The remaining suspects are her classmates or teachers from the chemistry department. We've also looked into the department's teachers, none of whom were close to Jasmine Gan, and she didn't know people from other schools' chemistry departments, leaving only her classmates from our school. Although the path we can take is narrow, the direction is crystal clear. We must investigate her classmates from the previous and following years. He paused, then continued, to kill for Jasmine Gan out of revenge. This emotion must be no small matter. From what many people have shared recently, reconstructing Jasmine Gan's past relationships, besides Wu Gang who pursued her strongly, Liu Lu was her boyfriend for a month or two. Among other male classmates, many had a fondness for her, but it seems there wasn't anyone particularly close. However, it could also be someone who silently loved Jasmine Gan, unnoticed by others, which is not uncommon among highly talented students in science and engineering. He went on, next, we'll put all other tasks aside and focus all our efforts on thoroughly investigating the male classmates around Jasmine Gan's height from the 5 years before and after her. Got it. What about Liu Lu? Check where he was on the nights of November 19th and December 6th. If he was indeed in the city, whether at home or outside, there should be some surveillance footage of him. If we can exclude him as a suspect, we'll release him. Of course, if not a single camera captured him, then, well, we won't be so polite to him, Greg Wang said with a menacing look. Jacqueline pondered for a moment and said, Boss, I think we have a problem. Even if we know who the murderer is, we currently have no evidence. If the murderer has disposed of all the chemical materials without witness or physical evidence, it's difficult to proceed even with a suspect. Greg Wan frowned. That's indeed a bit troublesome, but not a big issue. As long as we can identify the murderer, bringing him in for a few days of interrogation, even if he has cleaned up all the evidence, we can make him confess. Jacqueline understood Greg Wang's meaning, knowing who the murderer is and detaining him in the county bureau for several days and nights of interrogation. No one could resist confessing, and a series of evidence could be clarified. Of course, this approach is predicated on having a specific suspect in mind. Now that the police have abandoned the conventional investigative methods and are focusing on checking Jasmine Gan's classmates one by one, how much longer can Chasten hide? Through the observation of military binoculars, Chasten had already thoroughly understood the interior situation of the Imperial Garden. Perhaps to protect the privacy of the leaders, surveillance cameras were not installed inside the community, only at the entrance. Tracking Vincent Fan's Toyota also allowed him to grasp the Fan family's specific address in the community, with all information accurately drawn on the map according to standard proportions, memorizing the surrounding environment. At the same time, today he obtained an extremely useful clue: the Fan family had ordered milk. Early this morning, at 6 o'clock, he saw the milk delivery worker stopping at Vincent Fan's house through the binoculars from the mountain. However, he only saw the bright milk-branded delivery box in the trunk of the delivery worker's car, unable to determine which product the Fan family consumed. This was not a major issue. He quickly envisioned the scene of Vincent Fan and his wife dying from poisoned milk, smiling at the thought. Achieving this was not difficult. After several surveys of the terrain, he knew that although the security at Imperial Garden was tight, the guards allowed milk delivery and courier workers to enter the community without registration. Of course, he wasn't sure if the guards recognized the faces of the delivery workers or their professional equipment on the electric bikes, which required further experimentation. Now, he needed to consider which poison to use. Nicotine was obviously not an option. Adding nicotine to milk would create a bitter taste that only a fool would drink. What about cyanide? Most cyanides have a taste, generally almond-flavored, but a few cyanides are odorless and highly effective. He thought for a moment, but decided against it.